They said the boy was cursed, until the night his body began to glow. Under the dark skies of rural Kenya, a mother watched her 10-year-old son's skin shimmer like a dying star. Doctors were days away, medicine even farther, and every minute the light beneath his skin grew brighter. What they thought was a miracle was really the body's last cry for help. This is the true story of Musa, the boy who glowed in the dark, a story about faith, poverty, and the lives lost when help comes too late. Tell us in the comments, do you believe hope can survive where medicine fails? Subscribe if you believe every story like Musa's deserves to be seen before the light fades again. Night came early in Makueni. By 6 o'clock, the sun had already drowned behind the red hills, and darkness swept across the clay huts like a tide. The only lights left were the flicker of cooking fires and the tiny sparks of fireflies that danced above the cracked earth. The air smelled of smoke, maize, and dust. From far away came the faint hum of drums from a wedding in the next village, rising and falling like a memory of joy. Inside one of the huts, a boy sat cross-legged on the floor beside his mother. His name was Musa, 10 years old, his eyes large and curious like the night itself. He was sharpening a stick, pretending it was a soccer trophy. When I grow up, he said, I'll build a tower of light so high that even the moon will see our village. His mother Nalia smiled faintly as she stirred a pot of watery porridge. Dreams don't light the night, Musa, she said softly, but they make the dark easier to bear. The hut was dim. The small kerosene lamp sputtered weakly, its flame shaking every time the wind sneaked through the cracks in the wall. Outside, the chorus of crickets was relentless. Musa's shadow danced on the wall, thin, flickering, almost ghostly. Their life was simple and hard. Nalia worked from dawn until her hands cracked picking cotton for a few coins each week. The nearest clinic was 2 days' walk away. The last time they had gone when Musa's father had the fever, they returned empty-handed. The nurse had said there was no medicine left, no doctor available. 3 days later, the fever took him. Since then, Nalia had not trusted hospitals. She believed in what the elders said, that spirits watched over the living, that sickness was a message, not a mistake. But sometimes, when she looked at her son alive, dreaming so full of impossible hope, she wondered if those spirits had forgotten their promises. That night, Musa could not sleep. The wind hissed through the thatched roof, and the lamp finally died. In the pitch black, he whispered, "Mama, when will our village have real lights?" "Someday," she murmured, half asleep, "when God remembers us." Musa smiled in the dark, even though he could not see his own face. "Then I'll remind him," he whispered, pulling the thin blanket to his chin. Outside, the fireflies blinked again, as if answering his vow. The sun over Makueni was a cruel god. It burned everything it touched, fields, tin roofs, and even the skin of children who played too long in the dust. That morning, Musa was barefoot, running after a handmade soccer ball stitched from old rags and twine. His laughter carried across the red plain, clear and sharp like a bird's call. He didn't see the stone buried beneath the dirt until it hit his shin. He fell hard. The others laughed at first, then stopped when they saw the swelling bloom under his skin, purple and rising like a trapped bubble. Musa hissed through his teeth but waved them off. "I'm fine," he said, limping toward home. Nalia cleaned the wound with river water, frowning at the bruise. "You play too wild," she scolded, but her voice trembled. "The gods protect fools, but not twice." That night, Musa's leg ached. The pain was deep, different, like fire spreading inside the bone. He bit his lip to keep from waking his mother. By morning, the swelling had grown larger and the skin around it felt warm, tight, and alive. "Let me see," Nalia said. She pressed her hand against it and flinched. "It's hard as stone." "It doesn't hurt that much," Musa lied. But when he tried to stand, the room spun. Days passed. The lump stayed refusing to fade. The children stopped coming by to play. Musa sat in the doorway watching them from a distance, pretending not to care. Each night, he rubbed his leg, whispering to it like a secret. Then came the dream. He woke suddenly gasping, convinced he had seen light shining from under his skin, soft golden pulsing with his heartbeat. He told his mother the next morning. Nalia laughed nervously. "It's just the fire, my son." "You were dreaming." "No," Musa insisted. "It was real. I think the light is trying to help me." She said nothing after that. But when she turned away, her face darkened with worry. She had seen it too, just for a second, a shimmer beneath the skin as he moved. She blinked, and it was gone. That night, Musa whispered into the dark, "If you're real, little light, stay with me." The air in the hut seemed to listen. Outside, a lone firefly hovered by the window, flickering in time with his breath. By the end of that week, word had spread through Makweni that Nalia's boy was cursed. Children whispered behind mud walls, and old women crossed themselves when they passed by the hut. Musa's leg had swollen to nearly twice its size. The skin stretched tight, glowing faintly when the night came. To some, it was sickness. To others, a sign from the ancestors. The healer came on the 7th day. He arrived at dusk, dressed in robes the color of ashes, his neck heavy with bones and beads. He called himself Mz Barasa, the keeper of spirits. When he entered the hut, the smell of smoke and crushed herbs followed him. "This child," he said, touching Musa's leg, "has angered the ones beneath the soil. The light in him is not holy. It is the fire of punishment." Nalia fell to her knees. "Please," she begged, "tell me what to do." He ordered a ceremony to drive the spirits out. They bound Musa's leg in strips of banana leaf, drew circles of ash around his body, and sang into the smoke. The boy cried out when the healer poured a black liquid over the wound. It burned like acid. "Do not move," Barasa commanded. "Pain means the spirits are leaving." Musa's screams filled the hut, sharp enough to make the chickens outside fall silent. When it was done, the healer wiped his hands and looked satisfied. "He will rest now," he said. "If the light returns, you must bury his clothes by the river before dawn." He left her with a jar of foul-smelling paste and a promise that his payment would come after the next harvest. That night, Musa lay, trembling, his leg throbbing with heat. "Mama," he whispered, "why do the spirits hate me? They don't, my son." Nalia said, holding him close, but her voice cracked, betraying the fear in her chest. When the lamp burned out, the room filled with darkness again, except for that soft glow beneath Musa's skin pulsing faintly, stubbornly alive. Outside, the wind carried away the healer's chants, leaving only silence and the smell of burnt herbs. The next morning, the smell of herbs still clung to the walls. Nalia sat outside, staring at the horizon, her hands trembling from exhaustion. Musa slept fitfully inside, murmuring in his dreams. His skin was pale, his body weak, but the faint shimmer beneath his legs still flickered on and off like a secret candle that refused to die. Nalia felt lost. Every prayer she whispered now sounded hollow. The healer's medicine had done nothing except leave blisters where it burned. She looked toward the dry road that led out of the village, the road she had sworn never to take again since her husband's death. That afternoon she went to the market to sell a few mangoes. The sun baked the ground into dust. Traders shouted, flies buzzed, and the air was thick with the scent of sweat and smoke. Among the crowd, Nalia noticed a small stand where an old woman sat alone selling salt from tiny cloth bags. Next to her was a battered radio. Its antenna bent, its speaker crackling softly. "Grace," someone whispered behind her, "the old one who listens to the city." As Nalia approached, she heard a voice coming from the radio clearer than she expected. A man was speaking Swahili, calm and firm. "Many children die because their parents wait too long. If your child has a swelling, a fever, or pain that lasts more than a week, go to a clinic. Early treatment saves lives." The woman noticed Nalia listening. "That's Dr. Kamau," she said proudly. "He speaks to mothers from the city. He says sickness isn't a curse, it's something you can fight if you go early enough." Nalia felt her chest tighten. "But the clinic is far," she murmured, "and the journey costs more than we earn in a month." Grace looked at her gently. "Far is better than never." Before leaving, the old woman placed a hand on her arm. Sometimes she said God doesn't speak through priests or spirits. Sometimes he speaks through machines. That night, back in the hut, Nalia sat beside her sleeping son, watching the faint light pulse through his skin. For the first time in weeks, she felt something new. Not faith, not fear, but the stirring of a decision. By the third night after meeting Grace, Musa could no longer stand. The swelling had climbed from his shin to his thigh, and even the touch of the blanket made him cry out. The air inside the hut was heavy with the smell of herbs, smoke, and fear. Nalia sat beside him, wiping sweat from his forehead, whispering prayers that dissolved into sobs. Outside, voices murmured near the doorway. The neighbors had gathered, clutching charms and beads, shaking their heads. "The child is marked," one said. "If she stays, the curse will spread." Another added, "She should take him to the river and let the spirits decide." Nalia closed her eyes. For a moment she wanted to believe them. It was easier than facing what came next. But then Musa stirred and said, barely audible, "Mama, it hurts inside the light." That broke her. She stood trembling and went to the corner of the hut where her few possessions were kept. From a tin box she took her wedding earrings, a faded shawl, and the wooden bracelet Musa's father had carved before he died. She placed them in a cloth bag. The healer's jar still sat on the table, its paste crusted and useless. She lifted it, walked outside, and smashed it against the wall. The sound startled the neighbors into silence. "No more spirits," she said. "No more waiting." When the moon rose, she wrapped Musa in a thin blanket and tied him gently to her back with a strip of cloth. His breathing was shallow but steady. The night air was cool, the wind carrying the smell of dust and dry grass. She stepped onto the dirt road that led away from Makueni, the same road that had once taken her husband to his grave. Her feet sank into the red soil with every step. Behind her, dogs barked and someone whispered, "She's going to the city. She's mad." Nalia didn't turn back. She could feel Musa's faint warmth against her shoulder, the small glow through the cloth. "Hold on, my son," she whispered into the dark. "We will find the man from the radio. We will find your light again." And with that she began walking toward the horizon where the stars met the dust, her shadow long and thin, carrying the weight of love and of a promise. The road out of Makueni stretched like a scar across the earth, miles of red dust shimmering beneath the sun. Nalia had walked since dawn, her sandals breaking under the heat. The horizon rippled like fire. Each step kicked up clouds of grit that clung to her sweat-soaked skin. Behind her, the village had already vanished, swallowed by distance and haze. Musa's small body was tied to her back, his breathing shallow, his skin burning hot through the cloth. Every now and then, he murmured words that made no sense. Once he whispered, "Mama, there's a man in the light." She hushed him gently, though fear crept through her bones. By noon, the air was so dry that even the birds had fled. Nalia's lips cracked. Her tongue felt like sand. She saw shapes moving in the heat trees that weren't there, pools of water that vanished when she blinked. Her knees buckled. She crouched in the dust, pulling Musa into her arms. For a moment she thought she heard his father's voice. It came from nowhere and everywhere, soft as wind. "Keep walking." She looked down at Musa's leg. The faint light still pulsed beneath the swollen skin, slower now, weaker, but still alive. She rose again. Each step was agony, but the rhythm of her breathing matched the faint rhythm of his pulse. In that terrible silence, it felt as if the two of them were keeping each other alive. As the sun began to sink, she met a small caravan, a group of travelers returning from the salt mines. One man carried a sick child on his back. His face was hollow eyes, bloodshot. "The clinic was closed," he told her hoarsely. "The nurse said the doctor left months ago. We walked 5 days for nothing." Another woman added, "They said medicine will come next month. Always next month." Nalia felt her throat tighten. She wanted to scream, but there was no strength left. Instead, she whispered, "Maybe this time will be different." That night she rested under an acacia tree. The sky was clear, full of indifferent stars. She fed Musa a few drops of water from her tin flask and wiped his face with the cloth. He stirred, opening his eyes. "Are we almost there?" he asked. Soon she lied. The city is close. He smiled faintly, his voice barely a breath. When we get there, can I see the real lights? Yes, she said. All the lights you want. He closed his eyes again, and his small hand slipped from hers. For a terrifying second she thought he was gone, but then his chest rose, shallow but steady. Nalia leaned back against the tree and looked at the horizon. Somewhere beyond those hills was the city of Nairobi, where the doctor from the radio spoke of hope. Between her and that hope lay a desert of dust, silence, and faith. She whispered to the wind, "Please God, remember us before morning." The next day began with wind and silence. Nalia's legs trembled from exhaustion. Every muscle screamed for rest. The horizon shimmered with heat, and the road wound endlessly ahead. Her cloth shoes had torn apart, and her bare feet bled where the stones cut through the skin. Musa was motionless on her back, his weight light as a dream. When she heard the low growl of an engine, she thought at first it was thunder. Then a truck appeared in the distance, a rusted vehicle hauling sacks of grain swaying dangerously along the narrow road. Nalia waved her arms, stumbling forward. The truck slowed, coughing dust, and came to a stop beside her. The driver leaned out of the window, a man in his 40s with tired eyes and a kind mouth. "Where are you going, sister?" he asked. "To the city," Nalia gasped. "To find a doctor for my son." The man, Jacob, frowned. "That's a long way. You'll die walking." "Then I'll die walking," she said simply. He looked past her, saw the bundle on her back. "Is he alive?" "Yes," she said. "Barely." For a moment, Jacob hesitated. "People say carrying sickness brings bad spirits. I could lose work if they smell death in my truck." Nalia met his eyes, her voice breaking. "Please, it's not death I carry. It's what's left of hope." Something in her tone made him look away. He climbed down, lifted Musa carefully, and laid him on a sack in the back. "Get in," he said quietly. "But if anyone asks, your family." As the truck roared to life, the world blurred around them. Dust streamed behind like a trail of smoke. Musa's eyes fluttered open. "Mama, where are we?" "We're flying," she whispered, smoothing his hair. Jacob glanced in the rearview mirror, his jaw tightening. "In the city, there are hospitals," he said. "Lights everywhere." Musa smiled faintly. "Then, maybe." "I'll bring some back." The driver said nothing, but his eyes glistened. For the first time in days, Nalia felt the weight of the road ease, slightly replaced by the fragile hum of movement and the sound of a stranger's mercy. The city rose from the horizon like a mirage. Gray towers glinting in the haze, roads pulsing with movement, and a noise that felt almost alive. For Nalia, it was overwhelming. She had never seen so many people, nor such blinding light. It was everything Musa had dreamed of, and yet as she looked at her son's pale face, she realized he could barely keep his eyes open to see it. Jacob stopped the truck in front of a crowded building with faded blue paint and a rusted sign, Makueni District Hospital. The gates were half open, and a sea of people waited inside, mothers holding infants, men coughing into rags, children lying limp in their arms. The air smelled of sweat medicine and despair. "Here," Jacob said, helping her down. "This is where my sister gave birth last year. She said there were good doctors once." "Once?" Nalia asked. He hesitated, then shrugged. "Now they mostly have waiting lists." Nalia tightened her grip on Musa and stepped through the gate. Inside, voices merged into a dull roar. A young nurse behind the counter was flipping through a stack of papers. Her uniform was spotless, her eyes weary. "Please," Nalia said, her voice trembling. "My son, he's sick, very sick." The nurse barely looked up. "Does he have a patient card?" "No. We came from far, from Makueni village." The nurse sighed. "Then you must register first. It costs 300 shillings. I don't have that much." "Then I can't help you," the nurse said flatly. "Without payment, no doctor will see him." The words hit harder than any storm. Nalia stood frozen, the noise of the hospital fading into a ringing silence. Behind her, Musa whimpered softly. "Mama, is this the place with the lights?" She turned toward the nurse again, desperate. "Please, just look at him, he's dying." People in line began to stare. Someone muttered, "She's another beggar." Then, from the hallway, a man's voice called out calm but firm, "What's happening here?" It was a young doctor with tired eyes and a stethoscope around his neck, Dr. Kamau. He looked at Musa, then at Nalia. "Bring him in," he said. "Now." The nurse frowned. "Doctor, she can't pay." Kamau's voice hardened. "Then we'll count it as a debt to mercy." For the first time in days, Nalia felt something break inside her, not despair but relief. She followed the doctor down the hall, whispering to her son, "We found him, Musa. We found the man from the radio." Dr. Kamau's office was small and bare, lit by a single flickering bulb. The smell of antiseptic hung in the air, sharp and cold. Nalia laid Musa gently on the examination table. His skin was gray with exhaustion, his breathing shallow. Kamau's hands were calm, but his eyes betrayed the same worry Nalia carried. "How long has he been like this?" the doctor asked. "Months," Nalia said. "It started with pain in his leg. The healer said it was a curse." Kamau sighed softly. "You're not the first mother to say that." He unwrapped the cloth from Musa's leg, and for a moment he froze. The swelling was large. The skin stretched thin, and beneath it, yes, even under the hospital light, there was a faint, unnatural glow. "What is that?" Nalia whispered. Kamau shook his head. "It's not light. It's reflection under the skin. The tissue is breaking down. We'll take an X-ray." He spoke to a nurse in Swahili, and moments later they wheeled Musa to a dim room where the machine waited old and humming. The electricity flickered once before stabilizing. Kamau positioned the boy carefully, telling him not to move. When the film slid out, Kamau held it up to the light box on the wall. Nalia gasped. The black and white image glowed softly, showing a web of white veins and shadows. But one section, the bone in Musa's leg, was almost white-hot as though filled with fire. Kamau's face turned pale. "Osteosarcoma," he said quietly. "Bone cancer. It's very advanced." "Can you fix it?" Nalia asked. "If we had caught it early, maybe," he admitted. "At this stage, the cancer has spread to his lungs. I can only ease his pain." Nalia sank to her knees, clutching the edge of the table. "He's just a boy." Kamau crouched beside her. "I know. Many children come too late. The signs are there, pain that doesn't go away, swelling fever, but their families can't afford to come. By the time they reach us, it's already the end." Musa stirred, his voice small. "Doctor?" "Will the light go away now?" Kamau looked at him, unable to speak for a moment. "No, Musa. The light will stay. It's inside you." He turned off the lamp, and for one heartbeat the room was dark except for that faint shimmer beneath the boy's skin, pulsing softly like a star refusing to die. The hospital ward was a long, narrow room with peeling paint and beds crammed side by side. The fluorescent lights buzzed above like trapped insects. For the first time in weeks, Nalia didn't have to walk. She simply sat beside Musa's bed and listened to the hum of machines, to the rise and fall of her son's breathing. Dr. Kamau came every morning, his steps quiet, his expression calm. He spoke to Musa with the gentleness of someone who had long ago learned that words could not fix everything. "How's the pain today, champion?" he'd ask. Sometimes Musa managed to smile. Most days he just nodded. The boy could no longer stand. His leg was wrapped in bandages and a thin tube ran into his arm. Yet in those small hours before dawn, when the nurses walked softly through the corridors, the faint light beneath his skin still flickered, steady, stubborn, almost beautiful. He started to draw. One of the nurses brought him colored pencils left behind by another patient. Musa spent hours sketching on scraps of paper a bright sun, a soccer ball, a stick figure of his mother holding his hand. And always in the corner of every drawing he drew light beams bursting from the ground or floating around people's hearts. One afternoon, as Nalia washed his face, he looked at her and said, "Mama, if you could see what I see when I close my eyes, you wouldn't be sad. What do you see, my love, light everywhere? Not just from me, from everyone. It's just that most people forget they have it." She tried to smile, but tears slipped down her cheeks. "You shouldn't have to teach the world that lesson, Musa." He reached for her hand. "Maybe that's why I came." Later that evening, as Kamau checked the IV line, he spoke quietly to Nalia. "He's in less pain now. We've given him morphine, but—" His voice faltered. "If you'd brought him 6 months earlier, surgery could have saved him." Nalia's voice cracked. "I didn't know. No one told me pain could mean something worse." Kamau nodded sadly. "That's the problem. We lose children not because we can't treat them, but because no one tells their parents how to see the signs." That night, Nalia whispered a silent promise when she returned to Makweni she would tell every mother she met about those signs. Musa slept his small chest rising and falling. The machines hummed softly. For the first time, the light inside his skin no longer frightened her. It comforted her as though it were his soul rehearsing for the sky. Evening fell quietly over the hospital. Outside the window, the sky was painted in bruised shades of orange and violet. Inside, the air was heavy with antiseptic and the faint hum of machines. Musa had grown weaker. His eyes, once bright and curious, now looked far away as though he were watching something only he could see. Nalia sat beside him, her hands wrapped around his. She hadn't slept in 2 nights. The nurses had stopped asking her to rest. They understood there was no rest for a mother who could feel her child slipping away. Dr. Kamau entered softly, placing a small cup of water on the table. "He's peaceful," he said. "That's something." Nalia nodded, but said nothing. Her voice had gone quiet from too many prayers unanswered. Musa stirred suddenly and opened his eyes. His lips curved into a small smile. "Mama." "Yes, my heart," she whispered. "Do you know why I shine?" Nalia tried to smile, but her voice shook. "Because you're special." He shook his head weakly. "No, I shine because I'm afraid to be forgotten. If I glow, someone will see me. Maybe they'll remember I was here." The words pierced her like glass. She leaned closer, her tears falling onto his blanket. "You could never be forgotten, Musa. Not by me." He blinked slowly, his gaze steady on her face. "Then don't let the others forget either." She wanted to tell him the world would remember, that his light would change things, that his pain would mean something. But the words tangled in her throat. So she just held his hand tighter. "Will the doctor take my light away when I go?" Musa asked suddenly. Kamau's voice cracked. "No, Musa. The light will stay. It's not something we can take, it's something you leave behind." A soft smile crossed the boy's face. "Good. Then I'm ready." His breathing slowed, each rise of his chest lighter than the last. The faint glow beneath his skin brightened for a single heartbeat, filling the room with a warmth that made Nalia gasp. Then it faded, leaving only stillness. Nalia bowed her head over his hand, whispering through tears, "You are seen, my son. You are seen." Weeks passed, and the hospital ward felt emptier, without Musa's soft laughter echoing in it. Dr. Kamau found himself standing by the window where the boy's bed had been, the morning sun spilling across the sheets. The faint outlines of Musa's drawings taped to the wall, curling at the edges, were still there. Suns, stars, children, and always the light. He reached for one of the drawings and read the words scrawled at the bottom in uneven handwriting. "Don't let others forget." That night, Kamau couldn't sleep. He sat in his small office, surrounded by stacks of patient files and unpaid bills, and began to write. By dawn, he had outlined a plan, a small community fund to send mobile clinics to remote villages offering free checkups and education on early warning signs. He called it the Light Within Project. When he presented it to the hospital board, they laughed. "We can barely afford electricity," one official said. "You think we can fund miracles?" Kamau smiled faintly. "I'm not asking for miracles, just awareness. That's how miracles begin." Within months, his story spread. Local radio stations picked it up, the same station that had once broadcast his warning that no one in Makweni had heard. But this time, people listened. Mothers began walking for miles to bring their children to free screenings. Volunteers donated supplies. Slowly, light started reaching the corners of darkness. Back in Makweni, Nalia heard the broadcast while selling fruit in the market. Her heart stopped when she heard Kamau's voice. "This project is named after a boy who never gave up shining. His name was Musa. Because of him, children will be seen sooner, and maybe they will live. She pressed the radio to her chest, eyes brimming. Around her, the market buzzed with life, but all she heard was her son's laughter in the wind. The world had not forgotten. His light had found its way back home. Years later, the road to McQuaney no longer looked like a scar. It shimmered beneath rows of new solar lamps that lined the dusty path, their glow stretching into the night. Where darkness had once ruled, there was now light, soft golden, alive. The small health clinic at the edge of the village stood painted in fresh white. Its walls were covered with hand-drawn posters explaining signs of illness, swelling fever fatigue, and bold letters written in Swahili that said, "Go early. Save a life." Inside, nurses examined children. Mothers waited patiently, and the hum of a generator filled the air. Nalia walked slowly through the doorway carrying a basket of fruit for the workers. Her hair had turned silver, but her eyes were still warm. She paused by a framed photograph on the wall, a smiling boy holding a soccer ball, a faint glow drawn around him in yellow crayon. Beneath it, a plaque read, "Musa Komoto, the boy who glowed in the dark. His light showed us how to see." She reached out, touching the glass with trembling fingers. "You kept your promise," she whispered. Outside, the evening sky deepened into indigo. The children played near the well, their laughter echoing across the fields. A girl chased after a ball tripped and scraped her knee. Instead of brushing it off, her mother knelt, checked the wound carefully, and smiled with relief. Small lessons learned from old pain. At sunset, Dr. Kamau arrived from Nairobi, his car covered in dust. He greeted Nalia with a tired but genuine smile. "The clinic is full today," he said. "That's how you know it's working," she replied. He nodded. "We're planning to open another one farther east. There are still villages that live in shadow." Nalia looked toward the hills where the last rays of light touched the horizon. "Then keep going," she said softly. "The world will always need someone to carry the light." As darkness fell, the lamps flickered on one by one, their glow spreading across the land like a heartbeat. From somewhere beyond the fields, a single firefly drifted into the air, its tiny body pulsing in rhythm with the lights below like a spirit keeping watch. And in that glow, quiet but certain, Musa lived on.